that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
Sharon Needles is probably one of the biggest stains that the franchise of RuPaul's Drag Race will ever have on their legacy. Because not only did Sharon have a history of being problematic, but it was also an open secret around club promoters and fellow Drag Race queens. But for some reason, she wouldn't be held accountable for almost a decade after winning the title of America's Next Drag Superstar in 2012. Yet what was the timeline of events that led to Sharon being cancelled? In this video, I'm going to go over the series of events along with delve into some topics that led to the cancellation of Sharon Needles. Let's begin. Season 4 of RuPaul's Drag Race began airing in January 2012. Sharon Needles instantly stuck out from the rest of the cast because of how alternative her drag looks were. She also had the storyline of being a sort of underdog of the season. This was contrasted by Jeremy Carey, aka Fifi O'Hara, being the villain who detested Sharon's existence. By the time the season was almost done, Sharon had become the first queen to ever win 4 challenges in one season, which wouldn't happen again until season 9 with Shea Coulee, and arguably Alaska and All Stars too, but I don't really count All Stars. Along with that, Sharon became the #1 fan favorite. A fun fact is that shortly before the filming of All Stars 1, World of Wonder asked fans to vote for who they wanted back on their screens. And since season 4 was still in the middle of airing, Sharon Needles ended up being voted into the #1 spot. She was subsequently offered a spot to come back on All Stars 1, but rejected the invitation since she had just won season 4.
Mimi, I'm first. Mimi, I'm first was number 3 in the voting. I could not believe it.
Sharon winning season 4 had a huge impact on the fan base and the world of drag because while alternative drag had already existed way before Sharon stepped into the workroom, it wasn't really respected within the drag community, and most viewers weren't exposed to it. But while Sharon's edit on the show made fans think she was an angel, the reality couldn't be further from the truth. It was revealed throughout the years that during the filming of season 4, Sharon was very disrespectful towards the other queens. Specifically, Dita Ritz very publicly spoke about this in 2021, alleging that Sharon would call everybody on set the N-word, especially the queens of color. At one point, Willem confronted Sharon that she shouldn't be using that word, but Sharon would not listen. Dita also says that the production did nothing to stop Sharon's behavior and would just laugh it off as Sharon being Sharon. Yet despite the reality of Sharon's behavior behind the scenes of season 4, you would think that after a life-changing experience of being on Drag Race, that perhaps she would have changed as a person. But this was also far from the truth. In April 2012, shortly before the airing of the season 4 finale, a Facebook status from Sharon that was posted on Facebook in February 2012 began to gain traction on the internet. The post in question was filled with extremely offensive rhetorics, as well as the use of the N-word. In it, Sharon says that she had intercourse with a black person, which meant she had cheated on Alaska. She admits to using the N-word in her everyday life, and that she isn't afraid to use that kind of language. This story would subsequently be reported on by the Huffington Post and other media outlets that called out Sharon on her behavior. Sharon ended up responding to the situation by implying that the post was a fake, and that she in fact had not written the post, alleging that someone must have hacked her account, and that while she does wish that she could take credit for what was said in the post, it wasn't her that wrote it, and that she's, quote, too much of an intellectual to judge people based on something as simple as their race. And to no one's surprise, there was media outlets that believed Sharon's apology, with a post from Out magazine that tried to diffuse the situation by saying that they don't think Sharon Needles is racist. This article is actually a really great example of the narrative that the fanbase would end up having for Sharon's behavior throughout the following decade. To them, Sharon was just being a freak as per usual. To most fans, it didn't really matter whether or not Sharon had actually written the offensive post or not, because it was already known by that point that Sharon would wear swastika t-shirts and the Confederate flag purely out of the shock value that it would garner out of people. So despite the many instances of racist and problematic behavior, Sharon ended up winning the season 4 crown and would continue to get constant gigs all around the world as one of the queens with the highest booking fee, receiving opportunities left and right. It's during this time period that Sharon would use the platform at her shows to address the people who were upset at her, and would say to the audience that the people who call her performances offensive don't know what they're talking about, adding that she doesn't respect people's pronouns because she's too old and rich to care about those things, and that people that call her racist just because she paints herself brown sometimes don't actually know what true racist people are like. The Huffington Post article denounces Sharon many times, adding that there is no excuse for any type of racism, whether it be intentionally, accidental, or joking. This article was released in May 2012 and elevated the situation a lot since it was a very reputable news source. Which brings us to June 2012. While in the middle of an international tour, there was protesters that called for the cancellation of Sharon's show in Atlanta because they didn't want her performing there after her constant problematic behavior. Later that day, Sharon ended up doing a sit-down interview with a channel called The Georgia Voice, where the interviewers confronted Sharon about how a lot of her performances built around shock value has a very negative effect on marginalized communities. Sharon's argument was that a lot of her acts are built around making fun of stereotypes rather than perpetuating it. But throughout the interview, you can tell that Sharon couldn't really understand the main point that the interviewers were trying to get across, which was that the backlash wasn't so much about whether or not Sharon is racist, it's the fact that she was consistently ignoring the feelings of a lot of people that were hurt by her actions, with the way that she would excuse the use of the N-word or doing blackface as something that's within her art form. But despite the efforts made by the interviewers, Sharon consistently argues back at them and ends up bringing up the picture of her wearing a Nazi symbol with Mickey Mouse ears, which according to Sharon, Walt Disney was rumored to have been involved with the Nazis, so to her it was just political commentary. The interviewers were actually very thorough with the questions that were being asked.
Besides your intentions and besides your kind of personal apologies to Annika, can you say something clearly about your plan for the future?
That'd be good, yeah, I like that. Like your plan for maybe how you'll handle, like where you're gonna go from this conversation on as far as what you'll change about your acts and you already said you're gonna change your language, but what you change about your
Well, my
acts?
acts are like, if you've been following my tour or any of my,
Not
or
since
any
I
of
saw
my,
you in blackface, I stopped at that point pretty much. But.
yeah, but these are this was the House of Haunt days. We were the punk drag house in Pittsburgh. You know, the other drag queens wouldn't take us. All the pretty girls downtown wouldn't take us. So we started our own scene.
Right. I'm sorry. I said something clear. So like not another story, but maybe something.
No, I have nothing to say.
Okay. And you're not using the N-word and issuing a public apology about that.
But you're not going to like decide.
I'm not going to answer anything definitive.
Oh,
Especially when it's a little, sounds slightly attacking.
All right, so that's how it goes. Okay.
But Sharon refused to give a sincere apology about her use of the N-word. But she didn't want to admit that she hurt people, because it would have to be something that's quote, on her terms rather than a press statement. Midway through the video, one of the interviewers walks out of the room in frustration.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a press statement about that. I'm a clown. So, but
All right, well,
yeah, but I don't.
We heard what we needed to hear.
I don't
We'll
mind.
see you all night, right? You ready?
I'm ready.
Take care.
Have a good night, guys.
See y'all.
Later on, Sharon starts to cry, seemingly because of the amount of people that want her to stop using racial slurs.
So that's why I'm not going to say it. You're not going to bark at me to say something that I'm not even sure about. I'm not sure about anything.
Will you stop using the N-word though, as you...
Oh yeah, and that's really not, the word means freaking, I think language only has the power that we give it, and, but it's just a war I don't want to fight anymore, so.
Now, within the drag queen community, it was an open secret that Sharon Needles frequently used racial slurs because she thrived out of the shock value that it brought out in people. What's an interesting point is that Sharon was never really canceled for this sort of behavior. There was a considerable amount of fans that would discuss Sharon's racist behavior, but Sharon continued to have a very thriving career well into her future. Sharon's drag was based entirely on going against the grain. To top it all off, she represented a part of drag that hadn't really been seen on the show, which allowed her to earn the title of Queen of Halloween, becoming a high-demand booking for October drag shows. But Sharon's brand revolved around the concept of being this character that was just a trashy person all around. I mean, there's countless stories of the way Sharon would tell her fans some really offensive things, presumably under the guise that it made sense for her drag character to say these things. But over the years, it became harder and harder to distinguish what was Sharon's true self and what was her just trying to be edgy for attention. But one thing that did become clear was that her behavior was negatively affecting the people around her, something that she had been made aware of many times but chose to ignore thanks to how widely loved she was by the fan. Up until the grooming allegations came out, Sharon was pretty much still in the good graces of most of the mainstream Rue girls. For the later half of the year 2020, Sharon was still managing to rake in some more bookings, but not without controversy. On July 13th, 2020, Sharon got kicked out of a Halloween event and replaced with other fellow Drag Race queens. Sharon and Alaska were a dynamic duo that tended to be booked together during Halloween gigs, mostly because of the fact that Alaska and Sharon had turned into one of the most popular queens of the show, thanks to the fact that they were the first pair to be able to have the fan base obsessed over their relationship together. Yet a couple months after the airing of season 5, where Alaska lost the crown to Jinx Monsoon, it was announced that in December of 2013 that Sharon and Alaska had officially broken up. As to why, there was a lot of reasons. But overall, they had just outgrown each other, which makes sense given that they both had their lives dramatically changed. But it does go without saying that Alaska had dodged a huge bullet by having the relationship end as soon as it did. Sharon's run on season 4 was marked by producers as something new that the fanbase had never seen before. She approached drag in a manner that no other queen had done, avoiding the aspect of making herself look glamorous and going for a more out-of-the-box type of looks that invoked shock value from most viewers at home. In November 2017, a queer bar in Seattle that had just opened announced that Sharon would be one of their first guests. But after receiving backlash from the fans and the community, they ended up canceling Sharon's appearance out of respect for those that had been affected by her behavior years prior. It is interesting to me that for the most part, there was many moments the past decade where Sharon was truly being held accountable. I mean, given the amount of articles dating as early as 2012 and the online fuss that was made about her behavior on her tours, it would be hard to hide these scandals under the rug. But the truth is that Sharon wasn't alone in this. Club promoters definitely heard rumors about her behavior, but continued to book her. Other Rue girls knew about how she'd treat fans, but kept their silence. Because since Sharon had such a high status among the drag community, it would be hard to go against someone that had so much influence. It is a prime example of how some individuals are able to get away with a lot more thanks to the fans being able to excuse their behavior. In March 2021, etc., a queen who competed on RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under season 1 tweeted an interaction that she had with Sharon one time, where she alleges that Sharon had told her that she hates seeing women that do drag, and yelled the N-word repeatedly to Etcetera's face for shock value. Subsequently, Etcetera brings up a larger theme that we should explore, by stating that we need to examine the culture of teens idolizing drag queens from TV, which is a good point to add. I mean, drag queens at their core used to be known for being these huge divas that weren't at all meant to be role models. But due to the show gaining a big platform within mainstream media, younger audiences have begun to view queens as public figures that inspires their behavior. Nightclub culture is for the most part something that minors should not be around, unless of course it's an event that's advertised as family friendly. It otherwise puts a lot of drag queens in an uncomfortable situation. It's also important to know that when we are watching the queens on the show, we are seeing an edited version of who they are. Many aspects of their persona are left out, and production is able to build this cartoonish character that is tailored to fit a role into the storyline of the season. Despite all of this, Sharon's career, while badly damaged, was still able to receive some big opportunities. In October 2021, Sharon Needles was announced as one of the queens involved in a marketing campaign for Serve Vodka. The cancellation of Sharon Needles is a story of how the fanbase inflated the ego of an individual that capitalized off of being an edgy public figure that got praised whenever he pushed boundaries of what society considered to be acceptable. It resulted in Sharon being unable or outright refusing to accept that he had done anything wrong, because to him, people were just not appreciating the supposed intellect behind his art form. Yet, given how on the nose a lot of his offensive remarks were, it's a reach to say there was any intellect behind them at all. But I do think we've reached the point now where club promoters will have to think twice about booking Sharon, as it will probably be another stain on their legacy too. I wanted to take a moment to thank my patrons: Gay Uncle, Matthew Burns, Edgar Allan Pup, Franny Fishsticks, Common Ritter Fury, Emma Malander, The Only Sean, Not to Assume, and Oh Nicole. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon, link in the description. Like this video and comment below how you felt about it. See you guys next time.